As you heard in Sunday school this morning, I was raised out in the country on a gravel road, went to school to one-room school. Our church was having a revival, and my pastor and the evangelist knew that I was under conviction, and they came to my one-room school and asked my teacher, his name was Foster Hayes, if he would permit me to come out in the car. They wanted to talk to me about salvation, and Foster said, yeah. We went outside and got in the back seat of a 37 Chevrolet. Pastor on one side, the evangelist on the other, I was in the middle. And they asked me if I knew I was lost, and this was on a Tuesday, September 23rd, 1947. And the evangelist the night before had preached on hell. And so literally what they did was they scared the hell out of me. And my pastor, his name was E.V. Carrier. He said, Don, he said, all you have to do, Jesus is knocking at your heart's door. Revelation 3:20. All you have to do is let him in, because the doorknob's on the inside of your heart. And just ask Jesus to come into your heart, forgive you your sins, and he'll save you. And I did that. And I remember it as if it were yesterday. That night, that was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That night at church at the revival, I couldn't wait till they gave the invitation. And when they did, I was the first one up there. And then on October the 4th, I was baptized in a muddy farm pond that was owned by my Sunday school teacher.
Well, I was not raised, my parents didn't go to church, but Mother sent us to church, my sisters and I. And we would walk most of the time. And I went till, then we moved, we lived in West Virginia then, and we moved to Ohio when I was 12. And around the time I was 16, 17, I started going to this church. And the pastor would just drop in on me and talk to me, and not about church, just talk. But the last time he came, he said, "Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, hallelujah. You come forward Sunday morning." And so I did. But I never prayed. I really didn't ask Jesus into my heart. But I was baptized. And then this was like when I was 16. For years, I struggled with that. I knew things weren't right. And then we had a revival at the church we were going to, New Paris, Ohio. And I was really under conviction. And the next day, after the one night we were there, I was mowing my yard. And I just was so convicted, and I prayed and asked Jesus to come into my heart while I was mowing the yard. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't make it public. And I lived for another few years with that burden. Knew it wasn't right. And we had a thing in Dayton. It was a crusade, and the preacher, the evangelist, actually talked about the kind of thing I was going through. And I realized I was tired of fighting the fight. I was tired of letting pride get in the way of what I needed to do, because I hadn't done the first thing that God asked you to do, make it public and be baptized. And so I did that. I went forward in church and told them I'd been saved a long time but hadn't made it public, and then I was baptized then. And I think the pride that I had all those years and the disobedience of not doing what I knew I should do, I think God kept me from understanding the scriptures, because after that, they opened up to me. I understood what I was reading. And gosh, the years I wasted, and I think it was pride, not wanting to say to people, I wasn't saved at 16. So I wish now I hadn't have done that, but I just let pride get in my way.
I was really excited for the couple of 3 years, and then I got in those teen years, like 14, 15, 16, and I drifted. Went to church, went to Sunday school. My mom and dad always took us to church, but they were Sunday morning Christians, and you didn't see a lot of things pointing toward Jesus in our home. We'd go to church on Sunday morning, not on Sunday night, not on Wednesday night. We were Sunday morning people, and mainly now my dad and mom were Christians, but my dad loved to go because he loved to sing. But I was probably 30 years old before I really started growing in the faith. I mean, I'd read the Bible now and then, but I wouldn't read it every morning, and I wouldn't pray every morning like a Christian should do. And but the older I get, the more I get into Scripture, and I need to say that a guy that was very, very instrumental in me starting to study more was a guy, and he's in heaven now. His name's Paul Hoover. And we were in Sunday school, and we were discussing devotions. And I said, I've got a problem in that I do my praying at night in the bed, and I drift off to sleep. And Paul said, would you try something for 30 days? He said, get up an extra half an hour earlier and read your Bible, do your prayer time. And he said, it'll be a lot easier. And I tried that, and sure enough it was. But I lived 33 miles away from my office. We lived on a farm out in the country. And the sweetest prayer time I had was driving to and from the office. People would pass me and they'd see me talking. I guess they thought but I talked out loud, And till this day, I do my devotions in the morning.
I just started reading more, and then I also had more of a desire to be at church. Mm-hmm. And I just studied the Bible a lot, and I got interested in prophecy, and I did a lot of studying in that, and just different things. But it's all studying the Bible that makes the difference.
We always went to church, except there was a period of time, both taught Sunday school, and the chairman of the deacons where we went to church, his son had been away to college, and in the meantime got married, and they came back to our church. And when it came time to change teachers and officers in the fall, all of a sudden Bo's job was gone, and the chairman of the deacons' new daughter-in-law took her place. So we quit church for about 6 months, and that was a miserable 6 months. And finally we decided, bite the bullet and go on back, and that was a good thing that we did. And the girls would always go to church. We raised them in church, and it hadn't turned out too bad.
Well, Bev and Pam weren't with us all the time. They were there every other weekend and more in the summer. Sherry and Annette and Donna and Mandy were with us all the time. And I believe if I hadn't done what I did before I finally surrendered, I would have been a better mother. I think that hindered me.
Like she said, Bev and Pam was there just in the summer and every other weekend. They moved to Kentucky from Ohio. They must have been, I don't know, they're a couple years apart in age. They must have been 10 or 12 years old when they moved to Kentucky. And, but we went through 10, 12 inches of snow to see them when we were supposed to see them. And I remember excuse me, you can cut that out, but I remember when Annette was saved. I can take you to that bedroom. And then Donna was saved later and baptized, and Mandy, she's 2.5 years younger, and she wanted to get her head wet like Donna did.
Well, they were all different ages when they were saved. Sherry was more like 10 or 12, and Annette was just a little girl. What were you, about 7, 9? But she'd come and said something to me, and I said, well, I think Dad needs to talk to you. I wanted to make sure it was done right. So he went upstairs with her, and she accepted Jesus. And then Donna was
6.
I think she was 6.5.
6.5.
And she was adamant, and I said, well, I wanted to make sure she wasn't too young. And I just kept saying, well, we need to make sure. But she says, if I die, I'll go to hell. So we let her go ahead, and I was just worried she was too young. And then Mandy was young too, but then Mandy, years later, decided it wasn't real, and she accepted Jesus later as an adult.
She did that on Father's Day.
So it was just all different. They're all just different individuals and felt things differently and did things differently.
I can remember a lot of times going to Cincinnati to pick up Bev and Pam and take them back to eat, or El Dorado then, for the weekend. And a lot of times they were told that your dad won't be here this weekend because there's 10 or 12 inches of snow. But we were there. We never missed our week. We never missed our summertime together. We planned vacations with them, same as we planned with the other girls. And we went to Florida several times. We always had a Ford station wagon that had dual facing back seats. And we had, back then, the music was an 8-track. And we had rear seat speakers, and we would turn the music high and back on the back. And they would sing along with Charlie Pride and Crystal Chandelier. One time, because we had so many kids, even with a station wagon, you couldn't get all the luggage in the car if you were coming here, Florida for a week or 2 weeks. So we put it up on top of the car. And one time it started raining, and we had to run and get in under an overpass to get it inside the best we could. Another time, Bev's suitcase came loose, and all of her underwear and everything else was all the way up down 75.
We looked out the window, and there was clothes flying, and Bev said, "Dad, there goes my clothes down the highway." It was the funniest thing, so we had to stop and gather all those up.
And then there was, I guess the first time we ever went to Florida would have been about 1966, somewhere along in there. Well, I must say that they had to be about 5 years old before they went to Florida with us, because they would stay at Mom's because they couldn't enjoy Florida when they was 2 or 3 years old. So we got adjoining rooms. We got a bedroom with a kitchen in between the two bedrooms, kitchen in between. So we went and picked up shells, and we didn't know you had to boil those things, so we put them in the room. And about 4 days later, we'd come in there in that hot sun and all, and the smell would just be terrible. So somebody at the motel told, Peter Pan Motel on Daytona Beach. And the first time we went, I like Daytona because you could drive on the beach. And we pulled in on the beach, and right over here is this lady in a bikini. And I said, you know, I never have seen her with that few of clothes on, but that looks like Pat Walker. Sure enough, it was a client of mine named Pat Walker, who's gone now. But also the Harsbarger family went with us once. I don't know whether you remember that or not. And they got a room too at Peter Pan. They had 2 daughters. And I just attended John Harsbarger's funeral when we were home. So we had fun. Even though we didn't have them all the time, we had fun.
I felt like Bev and Pam belonged to me, too. I would have liked it if they lived with us, but that wasn't possible. But I would have liked that, because I love them like I love my own that I gave birth to. And I love their kids, and my grandkids.
And they love her.
And now we have 3 great grandkids that we're proud of as well.
The pets, the fact that we had 6 girls and we lived on 120 acres, and we had cattle, which were all females, dogs, which were all females. I mean, I was just lived around a bunch of females, but that's not all bad. I mean, the girls were my remote control, because you didn't have a remote control back then. So they got up and changed the TV. Annette, would you change that TV channel for me?
Did you come from upstairs and change my TV channel? Oh gosh, yeah, we made, well, Christmas time we made candies and cookies, and in the summer we had a great big garden, which the girls weren't real wild about working in the garden, but they had to do some things. We had chickens. I had 100 chickens, white leghorns, and we sold eggs. I had a sign out front, eggs for sale, and I had people stopping by. Even some of the girls' teachers would stop by and buy eggs from me. And the girls had to go gather the eggs sometimes. And one day in particular, I look out the door, or I might have even been in the yard, I'm not sure, but here come Annette. I had an egg basket. It was so big around, and it had like a wire handle, and it was all open. The whole egg basket was wire, but it was coated with a soft rubber material to keep the eggs from breaking. And here she comes out of the chicken lot, going around and around, holding the egg basket by the wire handle, swinging it around and around and around. So that was a little scary for a while. There's about 5 dozen eggs in that. But we just had a lot of fun. We had a tire swing that the kids loved, and their friends loved it. And it hasn't been but a couple years ago we saw a friend, I believe of Annette's, said, you know what I remember about your place the most was coming and playing on the tire swing.
She was cooking supper one night, and she looked out the front yard, and there come a bunch of hogs right up through the middle of our yard. The neighbors' hogs had gotten out and come over there.
We didn't have the greatest fences, and our cows got out all the time. We lived, the front of our place was right on Route 40, and they were always getting out and running up the road or going over on someone else's property, or Don would come to the house and say, the cows are out. So that meant everybody grab your shoes, get them on, get out quick as you can. And sometimes they were on a field that had corn in it. So that a little bit of the corn stalk was still there, and it would just scratch their little legs. They'd have to run through that field, but they got out there and we herded the cows back in until we got them all in. And you couldn't get a cow to go in an open gate. They had to go back to the place that they got out at, because that's where they wanted to go back in the same way. So we had a lot of experiences. That
reminds me that one time we were, Bo and I had gone to Montreal, Canada, and Mom came up from Kentucky, and and kept the girls and took care of things. And we no more than checked in the hotel in Montreal till I get a phone call from Mom, and she says the cows are out. I said, Mom, honey, I'm 2,000 miles away. She said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, call the guy, our tenant farmer that did our corn, soybeans and stuff, and she did. Another time, it was 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and we're sitting at the fairgrounds in Eaton watching a demolition derby, and a loudspeaker came on and said, Don Hall, go to the sheriff's office. So I go to the sheriff's office, and he said, do you live on Route 40? And I said, yeah. He said, do you have cows? And I said, yeah. He said, are they Charolais? And I said, yeah. He said, they're out. So we ran cows. Now, Bev and Pam was there at that time. We ran cows all night long. And the next morning, we never did get them pinned up, but the next morning, Dale Bowser, who was Annette's driver's ed teacher, well, all the girls' driver's ed teachers, and they all had accidents right away, so I blame him. But anyway, he got them pinned up the next day, and I had to take my trailer up there and haul them home, even though it wasn't a half a mile away.
Actually, the night that they called him, told him to come to the sheriff's office, I thought maybe he had done something I didn't know about. The sheriff was after him, but I was almost happy to find out the cows were out.
I don't try to beat people over the head. I try to live in such a way that they see Jesus in me. I play quite a bit of golf, and you get to know people on the golf course. And I don't throw clubs or get angry if I miss a putt, as some people that I know do. I just do little things like at lunch today, with my tip, I left a New Testament with a track in it. I tried to do that. I need to do it more, but just the way I live. I mean, I don't have any regiment other than to carry New Testaments with me all the time and give them to people. And the plan of salvation in a Gideon New Testament is right in the very back page, and I always tell them that's the most important page. All of it's important, but it has the plan of salvation. There's a place for them to sign right there on the back cover that they've done it and date it.
I try to talk with my family, and somehow or other, I think it takes someone besides your family to reach a person. I try to be the same every day. I don't try to live different during the week than I do on Sunday, and I just try to be real, basically.
I think Sunday school is the very best way to disciple, whether you're teaching or whether you're a student in Sunday school. You learn so much. As far as I'm concerned, the church is built through Sunday school. And it's very important when people come to church that you invite them to Sunday school. And then, so then they are discipled through that. But we try to recruit people in our Sunday school class. The Lord's going to have to provide us a bigger room, because we started with about 8 or 9 people in there 2 years ago, and you saw what it was this morning. But God is good, and you just have to keep on plugging. In life, I think you have to plan. They taught me that back in 1961. You fail to plan, you plan to fail. And not only do I have my obituary written out, I have the songs picked. I have the singers picked. Because one day, I won't be here. And as Paul said, you know, I want to be both places, but you can't hardly do that.
Discipleship means teaching, like my children, as they were growing up. And we used to have this program at this church in New Paris. It was called the Adoption Program. I think it was really good, but I don't know any churches that do it now. But if a person came and was saved, then an older Christian would go into that person's home with them once a week and go through literature and help them learn the scriptures. And I really did enjoy that. But that program has gone by the wayside, but I thought it was good myself.
Well, I don't think there's any accidents with God. And I think that I was put here for a reason. And if nothing else, if no one else that I come in contact with is won to Jesus except for my family, then I've done the job that he put me here for. Family first. And if you fail in the family, you know, it's tough. But the legacy I'd like to leave is the fact that my family can say I had a good daddy.
I think God put me here to take care of my kids and my husband. I feel like that was my calling. I never had a desire for a career or even a job outside of my home. I appreciate Don seeing to it that I didn't have to go out and help earn a living, because I was able to be home with my kids every day. Years after my kids were grown up, the youngest one, Mandy, was in high school and didn't get home because she'd stayed after school for cheer. And she would get home 5:30. And that would be about the time we would get home. But up till that time, I was basically there when they came home from school. I loved that. We had our time then. We'd play games or watch TV together, listen to music together, and that's my calling. And now I feel the same way about my grandkids. They're tops.
People say, how in the world can you retire when you're 58 years old and have a house in Ohio and a house in Florida? I said, it was God that took care of it. But being put into the business that I was in was not that. There again, it wasn't an accident, but it helped me to plan. Starting when I was 25 years old, planned to have a house here and a house in Ohio. I also had a plan to be debt-free by the time I was 40 years old. I didn't quite make that because Mandy came along in 1970, and so that kind of put me back a few years. But we were debt-free at age 45. Everything we've got's paid for. I give him all the credit. I was also fortunate enough to be in the insurance business. I have more life insurance on her than most men have on their own life, because we used it. I bought it on her because she was younger and it was cheaper, but I bought it as an investment. Right now, we've been retired 18 years, and we haven't had to go to that money. He's blessed. He blesses. He blesses.
Just that I'm thankful that God chose to be patient with me for a lot of years and to give me the family He gave me. Very appreciative.
Can I say one other thing? It sounded like I was bragging, but I was bragging on Jesus.